My wife was called fat by my friend's wife during dinner. I defended her, and now I'm thinking about cutting them off forever. I, 34M, have been married to my wife, 31F, for almost 5 years now, and together we have a beautiful 2-year-old son. Life has been hectic, as it always is for new parents, but despite the chaos, we've built a life together that feels full and rewarding. My wife and I have gone through a lot of changes in the last couple of years, emotionally, physically, and mentally, but the bond between us has only grown stronger. Before pregnancy, my wife was what people would probably call skinny. She has always been petite, the kind of person who could eat almost anything without ever gaining weight. But after she gave birth to our son, her body inevitably changed. She put on some weight, and to be honest, we both considered it a blessing. She looked healthier, fuller, and in my eyes, even more beautiful than before. She herself has said multiple times that she likes not being as thin as she once was. I know society places a lot of pressure on women to bounce back after childbirth, to somehow erase the evidence of what their bodies went through, but I have never subscribed to that. To me, my wife is perfect exactly as she is. A month ago, an old friend of mine came back to town. He, 35M, had been working abroad for almost 2 years, and we hadn't seen him since he left. When he reached out saying he and his wife, 33F, were finally back in the city for a few months, I was genuinely excited. We had shared so many memories in our younger days, and I was looking forward to catching up. Naturally, my wife and I invited them out to dinner. It felt nostalgic sitting at that table together after such a long time. We reminisced about the past, laughed over old stories, and updated each other on what had been happening in our lives. For a while, the evening felt perfect, like no time had passed at all. My friend seemed the same as ever, and my wife and his wife appeared to be getting along well, at least at first. But as conversations often do, the topic shifted toward family, kids, and lifestyle changes. That's when things took an unexpected and uncomfortable turn. Out of nowhere, his wife made a comment that immediately changed the atmosphere. She looked at my wife, smiled, and said something along the lines of, "Wow, you've really put on weight since I last saw you. You should join me at the gym while we're here, otherwise you might end up obese." The moment those words left her mouth, I could feel my wife stiffen beside me. My wife responded politely but firmly, saying she wasn't really looking to join a gym at the moment. But my friend's wife pressed on, almost as if she hadn't even heard her. "If you don't, you're only going to gain more weight. Trust me, it's better to get ahead of it before it becomes a real problem." My stomach sank. The warm nostalgia of the evening evaporated in an instant, replaced with tension I couldn't ignore. My wife has always been sensitive about her body, not insecure, but she's aware of the changes since giving birth. She has embraced them, but hearing someone outright call her fat in such a blunt way cut deeper than I think she wanted to admit. I could see it in her eyes, the sting, the hurt, the awkwardness. At that moment, I realized I couldn't just sit there and let it slide. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. At first, I thought maybe I had misunderstood or that she was trying to joke in a clumsy way. But no, her tone was serious, and her words left no room for misinterpretation. She had essentially called my wife fat in the middle of what was supposed to be a pleasant reunion dinner, and then doubled down when my wife tried to brush it off. The table fell into an awkward silence for a brief moment. My wife forced a polite smile, clearly uncomfortable, and said, "I'm fine. I don't think I need the gym right now." Her voice was calm, but I know her well enough to sense that she was stung. She doesn't like confrontation, and instead of snapping back, she tried to diffuse the situation with grace. But then my friend's wife leaned in, almost as if she were giving some kind of unwanted advice, and repeated, "Seriously, you should think about it. You've gained a lot of weight, and if you don't take care of yourself now, it'll only get worse." That was the breaking point for me. I felt heat rush to my face, and before I even thought about it, I jumped in. "She's not fat," I said, louder than I intended. The words came out sharper than I planned, but I wasn't about to let anyone talk to my wife that way. She gave birth to our son. Her body went through something yours hasn't. If you were in her position, you would understand. I could see the surprise on both of their faces, as if they hadn't expected me to push back. My friend shifted uncomfortably in his seat, looking down at his drink, while his wife looked almost offended that I had challenged her so directly. My own wife put a hand on my arm, trying to calm me down, but I wasn't in the mood to let it go. The rest of the meal unraveled quickly after that. Conversation became stilted, awkward. Every attempt to change the subject fell flat. We ate the rest of our food in silence, and the laughter that had filled the first half of the dinner was gone. I could tell my wife wanted to leave, and honestly, so did I. As soon as it was socially acceptable to cut the evening short, we said our goodbyes and left. On the ride home, my wife was quiet. I asked if she was okay, and she just nodded. She wasn't angry with me for defending her, but I could tell the comment had gotten under her skin. Later that night, she admitted that while she's proud of what her body has been through, hearing someone bluntly call her fat brought back insecurities she thought she had moved past. That angered me even more. Not at her, of course, but at them, for ruining what should have been a happy reunion, and for making my wife feel self-conscious when she had no reason to be. I couldn't stop replaying the moment in my head. The smug tone, the unnecessary cruelty disguised as advice, the way my wife had to sit there and take it. It ate at me. In the days that followed, I found myself avoiding any thought of reaching out to my friend. I felt betrayed, not by him directly, but by the fact that he let his wife speak that way without stepping in. Maybe he thought staying quiet was the polite thing to do, but to me, his silence spoke volumes. He sat there while his wife insulted mine, and that's not something I can easily forget. Weeks passed, and I didn't hear from him until recently. He finally messaged me, asking if everything was okay and if I had taken offense to what happened at dinner. He framed it casually, as though it had been nothing more than a minor awkward moment. I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to unload all my anger and tell him exactly how disrespectful his wife had been. Another part of me felt like saying nothing at all, because at this point, maybe silence was the clearest answer. What I did know for sure was that I no longer saw our friendship the same way. That dinner had changed things, and I wasn't sure if I even wanted to repair them. The days after that dinner felt heavier than I expected. At first, I thought maybe the tension would pass quickly, like most awkward social situations do. But it didn't. It lingered in my head like an itch I couldn't scratch, replaying over and over again. Every time I thought about the way she had said those words to my wife, I felt my jaw tighten. My wife, on the other hand, tried to act like it didn't bother her. She went on with her daily routine, caring for our son, managing the household, and handling her work, but I could tell there was something beneath the surface. Small things gave it away. The way she hesitated before looking in the mirror, how she avoided wearing certain outfits she used to love, or how she brushed off compliments from me with a weak smile. It wasn't just about the comment itself. It was about the way it had triggered old insecurities she thought she'd buried. One night, while we were putting our son to bed, I caught her staring at herself in the bathroom mirror. She wasn't crying, but her face was distant, almost sad. When I asked what was wrong, she shrugged it off and said, "Nothing." But I knew better. Later, when we were lying in bed, she finally admitted that the comment had gotten under her skin. She told me she hated how one person's careless words had the power to make her question herself again. Hearing that broke my heart. I reassured her that she was beautiful, that her body was strong, and had given us the greatest gift we could ever ask for, our son. But even as I said the words, I knew it wasn't enough to erase the damage. Words, once spoken, have a way of sticking, and while I could fight against them all I wanted, I couldn't control the way they echoed in her mind. Meanwhile, I kept thinking about my friend, or rather, the man I used to call my friend. His silence during the whole incident gnawed at me. I tried to imagine myself in his shoes. If the roles were reversed, if my wife had insulted his, I would have stepped in immediately, even if it meant awkwardness. To me, that's what respect looks like, protecting the dignity of the people you care about. But he hadn't done that. He let it slide, as if it were nothing, and I couldn't decide which was worse, her cruel words or his complicit silence. I started to pull away without even realizing it. I didn't message him. I didn't answer his casual, "Hey, how are you doing?" texts. I ignored the photos he posted on social media, the cheerful captions about being happy to be back home. I didn't want to see them, didn't want to be reminded of the night that had soured everything. At first, my wife asked me if I thought I was being too harsh. She said maybe it wasn't worth cutting ties over one bad evening. But then, after a pause, she admitted she didn't feel comfortable being around them anymore either. That was all I needed to hear. If she felt unsafe, judged, or belittled in their company, then there was no way I was going to subject her to that again. The silence between me and my friend stretched into weeks. A month later, he finally reached out with a longer message, asking directly if something was wrong. He wrote that he had noticed I hadn't been in touch and wondered if I had taken offense at how the dinner went. He ended it with a lighthearted line about hoping we could get together again soon. I stared at that message for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard more than once. Should I explain why I was angry? Should I tell him plainly that his wife had crossed a line? Or should I keep ignoring him and let the distance speak for itself? In the end, I didn't reply. I couldn't bring myself to pretend everything was fine, and I also couldn't stomach the idea of hashing it out over text. So I did nothing. Silence, once again, felt like the only option. But even as I left his message unanswered, the question remained, was I overreacting? Was I being too protective, too sensitive? Or was I simply doing what any husband should do, standing up for his wife and drawing a line when someone disrespected her? After leaving my friend's message unanswered, I expected the situation to weigh less on me. Usually when I make a decision to cut someone out, there's a sense of finality, a clean break that allows me to move on. But this was different. The silence didn't feel like closure. It felt like a pause, like the unresolved chapter of a book I didn't want to finish, but couldn't walk away from either. For days, I wrestled with what to do. On one hand, this was someone I had known for years, someone who had once been an important part of my life. We had gone through milestones together, college days, late-night conversations, even some of the biggest changes in our careers. But on the other hand, I couldn't shake the memory of his wife's words and his own silence that night. No amount of nostalgia could undo the way I felt sitting across from him at that dinner table. The truth was, I didn't trust him anymore. I didn't trust that my wife could sit at the same table as his wife without being subjected to more judgment or unsolicited advice. I didn't trust that he would stand up for us if something similar happened again. And once trust is gone, what kind of friendship is left? My wife told me she didn't need me to fight her battles for her, but she also admitted she appreciated that I'd stepped in. She said it reminded her that we were a team. Still, she also worried I was letting anger consume me. She reminded me that sometimes people say thoughtless things without meaning harm. Maybe she didn't mean it the way it sounded. My wife suggested one evening while we sat together on the couch. But I couldn't accept that. Intentions didn't erase the sting of words. And in this case, it wasn't just a careless slip. It was repeated, insistent, and pointed directly at her insecurities. Even if it had been unintentional, the damage was done. And if my friend's wife didn't realize how inappropriate it was, then it was unlikely she'd ever stop. So I started pulling back in small ways. When my friend messaged again a week later, suggesting another dinner, I ignored it. When he followed up with a casual invitation to a weekend get-together, I made up an excuse about being busy with family. I didn't block him, but I didn't engage either. I told myself this was the gentlest way to create distance without sparking outright conflict. At first, it felt almost cowardly. Avoidance isn't something I pride myself on. But as time went on, I realized it was less about cowardice and more about protecting peace. My wife's peace, my own, and the peace of our little family. Life is already complicated enough without inviting negativity into it. Of course, ignoring him didn't stop the questions in my mind. Was I being too harsh? Was I throwing away a friendship over a single evening gone wrong? Or was this one evening simply a glimpse of who they really were, a reality I hadn't seen before because we had been apart for so long? The more I thought about it, the more I leaned toward the latter. People reveal themselves in small moments, often when they don't think anyone is paying attention. That dinner had shown me something I couldn't unsee, and as much as I wished it had gone differently, I couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. Weeks turned into a month, and I never responded. My friends' messages became less frequent until eventually they stopped altogether. The silence between us stretched longer, and with each passing day, I felt the gap widening into something permanent. Did it hurt? Yes. Cutting someone off, even quietly, always does. But when I looked at my wife, at our son, at the life we were building together, I knew where my priorities were. Protecting them came first. Everything else could fall away if it needed to. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real decision point. Not just creating distance from an old friend, but choosing where my loyalty, energy, and love belonged. The longer the silence stretched, the more room I had for reflection. And with reflection came doubt. At first, the decision to distance myself had felt clear and justified. My wife had been insulted. I had defended her. My friend had failed to step in. Case closed. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into over a month, I found myself replaying the friendship in my head, almost like flipping through an old photo album I wasn't ready to throw away. I remember the nights we spent talking until dawn when we were younger, back when the future felt limitless. I remembered how we celebrated each other's milestones, his first big job, my engagement, his wedding, the birth of my son. There was a comfort in that history, a shared language that only old friends understand. Could I really let all of that go because of one evening gone wrong? But then the other voice in my head would remind me, it wasn't just one evening. It was the way his wife had looked my wife in the eye and called her fat. It was the persistence, saying it once, then doubling down as if my wife's own response didn't matter. It was his silence, his refusal to step in, his willingness to let my wife sit there and absorb the sting. It was the way my wife later avoided mirrors and second-guessed herself after months of finally feeling comfortable in her own skin again. That wasn't just an awkward moment. That was a wound. Sometimes at night, after my wife had fallen asleep beside me, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had been too quick to draw a line. What if he genuinely didn't know how to respond in the moment? What if he had talked to his wife afterward and told her she was wrong? What if he was just as embarrassed as we were, and the silence between us was his way of not making things worse? The problem was, I didn't know. I couldn't know, because I hadn't given him the chance to explain. By choosing silence, I had closed the door before he could even knock. That thought gnawed at me. At the same time, I kept coming back to the same truth. Protecting my wife came first. It wasn't about being overprotective. It was about respect. The people we allow into our lives should never make the people we love feel smaller. And if they do, even once, it's hard to ever see them the same way again. I realized something else too. Friendships, like marriages, aren't just tested in the good times. They're tested in the moments when things go wrong, when someone is hurt, when there's conflict, when a line is crossed. And in those moments, actions matter more than history. My friend's action, or in this case, inaction, had spoken louder than any of the good memories we had shared before. Still, the doubt lingered. Was I being unforgiving? Was I letting pride and anger steer me? Or was this just part of growing older, of realizing that not every friendship is meant to last forever? I talked about it with my wife one evening, after putting our son to bed. I confessed that I wasn't sure if I had made the right call. She listened quietly, then said something that stuck with me. Maybe it's not about right or wrong. Maybe it's just about what kind of people we want in our lives. Her words settled something inside me. She was right. It wasn't about punishing him or holding a grudge. It was about choosing peace, choosing respect, choosing to surround ourselves with people who lift us up, not tear us down. And yet, even as I accepted that truth, I couldn't deny that a part of me still mourned the loss. Friendships don't end with slammed doors or dramatic goodbyes. More often, they fade in silence. And in that silence, it's the memories that haunt you most. The laughter, the milestones, the history that now feels unfinished. That's where I found myself, caught between the certainty that I had done what I needed to do and the ache of knowing that something once important to me had slipped away, maybe forever. By the time another month had passed, I realized something important. Silence had become my answer. I hadn't written back to my friend. I hadn't made any effort to reconnect. And deep down, I knew I wasn't going to. The friendship that once felt like such a defining part of my life was now just another chapter closed. There was no dramatic confrontation, no angry words exchanged, just distance, a gradual fading until it became clear that our paths had diverged. And maybe that's how some relationships are supposed to end. Not with fireworks, but with a quiet recognition that things are no longer the same. It was harder than I wanted to admit. There were moments when I missed the simplicity of the old days, when friendship came easily and loyalty seemed unshakable. But life changes people. Marriage, parenthood, time apart. It all shifts priorities, reshapes values. Maybe the truth is that we simply grew into different people, and what happened at that dinner only revealed how far apart we had already drifted. My wife noticed a shift in me. One evening, after our son had fallen asleep, she asked if I regretted the way things turned out. I thought about it for a long time before answering. Regret. I said finally. I don't know if that's the right word. I'm sad, yes, but I don't regret standing up for you. I'd do it again without hesitation. She smiled softly and squeezed my hand. That's all I needed to hear, she said. In that moment, I realized that maybe the real measure of whether I had done the right thing wasn't in salvaging a friendship, but in protecting the love and respect within my marriage. If defending my wife meant losing a friend, then that was a trade I was willing to make. Every time. Still, I couldn't help but wonder what others would think in my position. Was I too harsh for letting one incident end a long friendship? Should I have been more forgiving, given him a chance to explain? Or did I do the only thing I could do? Protect my wife's dignity and put my family first? That's the thing about real life. It rarely offers clean answers. It's messy, complicated, full of gray areas. We make choices with the information we have, guided by our values. And sometimes those choices cost us things we never expected to lose. As I sit here now, months later, the sting of that night has faded, but the lesson remains. Friendships are precious, but not all of them are meant to last forever. Some are seasonal, some are situational, and some end because a single moment reveals a truth that was always there beneath the surface. For me, that dinner revealed two truths I couldn't ignore. My wife deserved better than to be disrespected, and I deserved friends who would have my back as much as I had theirs. Losing an old friend hurts, but compromising those truths would have hurt even more. So here I am, left with a question I can't answer alone. If you were in my shoes, sitting at that dinner table, watching your wife get called fat and belittled in front of everyone, what would you have done? Would you have defended her and walked away from the friendship, as I did? Or would you have tried to salvage it, hoping that one bad night didn't define everything? I don't know the right answer. All I know is the choice I made and the peace it brought to my home. And maybe that's enough.